Begin today, the 10th letter. Today begins with, after greetings of life and peace, he quotes an admonition of the prophets. Prophet Jeremiah in the book of Lamentation. What does he say to the Jewish people? He says to the Jewish people, this is during the time of the destruction of the first holy temple, Chazdei Hashem ki loi tamnu, the kindnesses of God have surely not ended. So that's the way it's kind of translated. God's kindnesses don't end. But if that's all it meant, then it should have said loi tammu, that they have not ended. Tamnu has a different meaning, that we have not ended, or we are not complete. So one is about God's kindnesses that don't end, and one is about us not being complete. So because it's tamnu, it's a third person, plural. So there obviously has to be a connection between the idea of God's kindnesses that don't end and that we are not complete. We say in the Amidah every day, Shemona Esrei, in our silent prayer to God, we say a similar, but Ki loi tamu chasadecha, for your kindnesses have not ended. So there it's not third person plural. It's that speaking about God's kindnesses. So to understand this anomaly, this difficulty in the words, let us preface something from the Zohar first. Zohar says, Is chesed v'is chesed. There is one kind of kindness and another kind of kindness. Two types. There's a chesed called chesed olam, a world-like kindness, chesed, which means just as the world is limited, likewise this kindness is limited. And then there's a rav chesed, an abundant form, a boundless kind of kindness. Both of these types of kindness is something that we've learned previously, that God creates the world in such a way that we're the ones who are not just responsible, but are capable of drawing down here into our world, our lives and our world, God's kindnesses, both the limited form and the abundant, boundless type. We have that capacity. So today, tomorrow, we're going to speak about the limited form of kindness that we are able to, that we draw into this world. We'll begin at least the discussion today. And that will be based on understanding another idea. Torah, that we're learning right now, is called oiz. Oiz means strength, power. Hashem oiz le'amo yitain. Hashem grants strength to his people. What is that strength that he gives us? Is Torah. It's an expression of gvura. Gvura means might, which means the left side, the opposite of kindness, in the sense that it is withholding of giving, right? So, someone says a nasty word to you, you want to give it to them, but you have power, self-control power, that you hold back and don't give it to them. That's gvura. That's the power of withholding, right? So, our sages say, concerning the Torah, that the 613 mitzvahs are mipi hagvura. The Moshe gave us are mipi hagvura. So it's a reference to God, that they come from God, but they come from the mouth of gvura, the mouth of God's power. So we have a reference here again to Torah being the left side, the idea of gvura, refrain, holding back. Yet at the same time, we also have a phrase, or actually a verse in Deuteronomy, that from his right hand a Torah fire was given to us. So here we have actually a big challenge. We have two things coming together here. One is the right hand, which is chesed, giving. And yet it is, what is he giving? In the right hand, a Torah, a fire, which fire is the left. When we speak about chesed, in the previous letter, we had the concept of kindness, that kindness flows from on top to below. That's the idea of water. Chesed is the idea of water. Water always goes from the highest point, it goes to the lowest point. Kindness is about giving. And as we explained in the previous letter, the concept of giving there, an act of kindness, was giving to those who are destitute, those who don't have. That's the lowest point, right? The kindness needs to reach there. But, so that's chesed. Fire, on the other hand, fire is down up. Water is up down. Giving is an expression of the person, so to speak, expressing themselves, extending themselves. So that's the idea of up down. Gvura, fire, is the opposite. It's down up, as fire is something that flickers the flame upwards. It's the opposite manner. It is the idea of gvura, expression of gvura. That's what fire is. So we obviously need to understand over here, what does it mean that Torah is an expression of God's right hand, chesed, and at the same time the left hand, as it were, gvura, power, restraint, refraining. So the Alter Rebbe explains. The source and the root of Torah is solely God's kindness, as referred to by the right side. Meaning that through God's kindness, he radiates an infinite Ein Sof light in all the worlds. How? By us drawing it down when we learn Torah, do a mitzvah. But particularly, how do we do that? By the fulfillment of 248 positive commandments. Because the 248 positive commandments are, in fact, the 248 organs of the king. Of course, a metaphor, right? What does that mean? Well, we have 248. Each mitzvah is a vessel to contain the light of God. This cup is a vessel that contains the water we put into it. My eye is a container for the soul that is contained in it, that gives it a particular capability of seeing. My ear is a container, is a vessel to be able to contain the light of the soul in a different manner that gives me the capacity to hear and the like. So what does that mean? It means each one of the 248 positive commandments are a container, are a vessel for the infinite light of God, the soul, just as the soul of man, so the soul of God, as it were, meaning the Ein Sof of God, the limitlessness of God, that now is contained, as it were, in a particular manner of expression, meaning one of the 248 expressions, organs, as it were, of the king, that it is contained in. And that's one of the mitzvahs. Each one is a different, then becomes a different mitzvah. So the imagery here is very clear. Now, what happens? You do a mitzvah, right? What are you doing? You're now eliciting one of the 248 manners of God, of the Ein Sof, as it comes through, figuratively, the vessel of a mitzvah. Through the mitzvah, it comes through a downflow. It needs first to be vested. In other words, this is an expression of God's kindness, that through a mitzvah, we get a divine energy, life, light of God that imbues our soul, imbues our world around us. However, before it comes down into this world, it needs to be vested in the attribute of Gvura, which is referred to as fire, which means concept of contraction. Taking the light, this infinite light of God, and now contracting upon it, enabling us to become vested in the performance of the commandments with the light of God. And hence, we do it with contracted, physical, limited things, like tzitzis made out of wool, tefillin that are made out of leather and parchment, offerings that are animals, plants, and minerals, charity that involves money, physical material objects. Even when it comes to the mitzvah to love God, it has to be expressed in a physical heart. There's a measure to it. This is what what our sages tell us, that when God gave us the Torah initially, the infinite light of God was so powerful at Sinai that our souls took flight. It was too powerful for us because it came from God's right hand, boundless kindness, a boundless light. But it needs to be ultimately communicated to us in a manner that is the Torah fire, Gvura, that restricts it into a finite expression. Okay, that's today's teachings. Let's unpack that. So what are we saying here? Well, this idea is going to be continued tomorrow, of what this means. But what we have over here is Torah ultimately is an expression of the essence of the Ein Sof, of limitlessness of God, and as God's kindness, He imbues a light of Him when we do an act of a mitzvah. So if I'm putting on tefillin, I'm giving charity, if I'm, today we hear the shofar, I pray, each one of them is just as my body has 248 limbs, my soul vests itself in those limbs in a particular way to give a functionality, to give life to that part, that limb, that part of my body. So to the mitzvah that we do draws down a light of God into us, into the world. So it is coming from a kindness of God to draw down that light, but it doesn't just come from God's kindness, it's also vests itself in Gvura, in His power of contraction, of holding back the light, in order that the expression of the mitzvah that we fulfill is in a limited manner. And meaning, we're doing something in a limited way, because we're dealing with the physical things in the physical world. I don't want to give tomorrow's class because it's sort of like, what does that mean? So he's going to give the examples tomorrow. of what that means, that limitation, and how we can appreciate and understand that concept. So I'm kind of in the middle of a thought, but I think the important take home is, let's say on a personal level, is the fusion, something that's godly, brings two opposites together. Chesed and Gvura are two opposites. Chesed giving, Gvura refraining. Chesed is God's giving of the infinite light through the mitzvah that we do, that is now contracted through Gvura and limited. Therefore, the actual expression of the mitzvah is in a physical way. Again, more on that tomorrow. But what that means for us on a personal level is to act godly means to be able to incorporate two opposites together. In other words, when we're acting human, we're going to act by an instinctual nature that we have. So either we're more kind, or we're more chesedic, or we're more gvuradic, right? We're either more of an expression of the right hand or the left hand, the right side or the left side, right? And we will act instinctually, naturally, because that's the nature of the way our soul is. That's human. And we see when we respond, when the perfect time for this to appreciate is that, a button's been pushed in our lives. Something about us that, when that's said to me, that pushes a button. That pushes a button. And what do? We act instinctually. That's coming from the animal soul, ultimately, that instinct. And it doesn't incorporate an opposite reaction. There'll only be one natural reaction that will fall into, unless, of course, we are mindful and we choose otherwise, and we recognize, no, this is my natural reaction. Let me see if I can go against it and do the opposite, or incorporate at least the opposite. And that's what we're learning over here. Torah, God's truth, incorporates his chesed, kindness, and his gvura. And that's what it means that from the right hand, he gives us the Torah of fire. Right is chesed, fire is the left, gvura. Contraction, holding back, refraining. So for us to be a reflection of the Torah, of its teachings, of its values, so the take home over here is two opposites that coexist within me. So, for example, so again, someone pushed that button that brings out kind of a base nature within me. I don't allow that to express itself. And I'm actually think the opposite. I actually think on how I could be kind to that person, even though they did something that was unkind. That I can be kind to that person. And through that act of kindness, then I could incorporate thereafter also the power of gvura, of not self-restraint, that I didn't respond to them in a negative way, or my natural way, because it's not about putting together your animal soul with your godly soul, right? No. In the godly soul, there's two opposite things that can come together. So when you've not allowed your natural reaction, your instinctual nature to respond, but you respond from a higher place, and as example, being kind, afterwards, what we can see and we can appreciate in our lives is that we can even now maybe incorporate the left side, Gvura, creating the proper boundaries, or perhaps even rebuking the person or saying something to the person, but now you're not coming from a place of a hole in your soul. You're not coming from a place of, being hurt. You're coming from a place of you're connected to that person, even though they did it in indiscretion. You're coming from that place, and then you're, after that kindness, showing them the opposite of what they showed you, that you can now incorporate the Gvura also at the same time. And, sometimes saying something to them in a way that is not as chesedic, shall we say. It's kind. But it's coming from a kind place. Just like Torah is coming from a kind place, but now is expressed through Gvura. So likewise, we can come from a kind place and express in Gvura something that, maybe the person needs to hear. That's incorporating the two opposites. Again, that is not natural. That is, to be able to do that, that's godly. All right. Let's open up for some questions, some conversations, some ideas here. I'm going to look first on Facebook so I don't lose the feed. If people have questions, 2 question marks before you ask. That way I could see it immediately and won't lose it. Curtis or Yehuda, did Hashem Tzimtzum come from the side of Gvura? Yes, being contraction, but also Chesed. Yeah, Tzimtzum is the side of Gvura, absolutely. Davida, do our souls come down into this world with one side already more dominant than the other? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's the difference between Hillel and Shammai. Hillel came from the right side, Chesed. Shammai came from the left side, Gvura. And that's why, because they expressed the root source of their soul. By the way, Gvura is not wrong, and Chesed's not wrong. Chesed's not right, and Gvura is not right. They're both. They both have their proper way to be expressed. So therefore, the Shammai saw things from Chesed, which means to embrace, kindness, and Hillel saw from in a Chesed, in a way to embrace, and therefore said kosher, permitted, and so on, which means to embrace. And Shammai saw from the left side Gvura, which meant refrain, holding back, not embracing, not kosher, not valid, impure, and so on and so forth. Now, sometimes they would say the opposite. You know why? Because holiness means you're able to incorporate the opposite. They reflected their soul as it was an expression in the root source. They were a complete conduit for the divine soul within them. But being that the divine soul is incorporating the opposite, so therefore Shammai sometimes would be more lenient, and Hillel would be more strict, because they incorporated both. So so our souls come from either the right or the left. Sometimes they come from the middle also of Tiferes, of compassion. Okay, do we have anybody on Clubhouse that wants to share with us?
Yes, I would like to share, Rabbi.
Please share.
So I learned that we can always recognize our natural instinctual reactions that we have within us, but choose to respond from a higher place. So this to me is very apparent when I deal with my child And to some extent, I think adults act like children. Sometimes we tend to react versus respond. And to respond takes like restraint and a pause. And it's like an awareness that I have to activate. And it takes effort, to do that. It's not natural.
Exactly. Yep. Right. Natural, instinctual response is natural. And to, I suggest it's always good to take a deep breath, count to 3 or 10, whatever works, and therefore don't make that initial response, because we have to remember that who we are by nature is more an expression of our animal soul than our godly soul. So the first responder will be our instinct, animal soul, unless we allow it to be filtered and we can not do that which is instinctual and think it through, ponder upon it, pause upon it, as Vilma, as you said, and then we could come to respond rather than react. Thank you. Very good. Excellent. Margalozata, how to deal with a very negative, pessimistic person. I know the righteous can brush their comment off, but I am not there yet. And so their negativity always sticks with me, however much, right, even though it might be for a shorter period. Okay, that's a great question. So that's in Tanya therapy or mentorship, because that's like, it really depends on the personal, on the circumstance and what it is, who it is, and what's going on, and so on and so forth. So it's not very simple. In here, we're learning over here, meaning we're learning, the truth is Torah is being taught to us by the Alter Rebbe, and sometimes it's a high bar, and we're not there yet, and that's understood. I get that. I'm. By the way, when I'm learning with you folks, you want to know the truth? I'm teaching myself. Thank you all for participating and listening to me talk to myself, because that's what I'm doing. Because anything that I'm teaching over here is something that I need to talk to myself in order to incorporate within myself. Even though I may have much of this, I may need much more. In some areas more, in some areas less, whatever the case may be. The point is, being that this is the truth, and the truth is not easy to incorporate and to live with. So we need constantly to talk about it and to repeat it in order that it becomes more and more part of our reality in our heads and our hearts, and ultimately in our behavior. So yeah, that's we got to do. So how to deal with such a thing? It's hard to depending who the person is. Maybe it's a person that you shouldn't be around, but maybe it's a loved one that you have no choice but to be around. So if you recognize that whatever you hear is meant for you to hear. Meant for you to hear doesn't mean you have to accept it. You have to accept it on some level. So if it's meant for you to hear, there's something there that you can take from it. But that have to be really healthy people. And we're not so healthy. So therefore, when something negative is said to us, we take in the negativity. We're not supposed to take in the negativity. We're supposed to take the message, not the negativity. The person meant negativity. That's what they meant. But the fact that you heard it is because God allowed you to hear it. Meant for you to hear it. So he meant you to hear it, not in order that you should be devastated by it, hurt by it. No. In order to take a message from it. What the message is, that's part of Tanya mentorship, by the way. this Wednesday for those interested. Go to Tanya Rabbi.com and you can sign up there. But but the idea is take the message. What the message is, okay, that's sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's harder, but there's a message. Again, please do come and join us on this Wednesday. We have a few slots left, not too many. For those interested, again, TanyaRabbi.com. Heather says, I know now that choosing to temper my response with kindness reflects chesed. Yes, thank you. Katie never gets why I'm talking to myself. Well, you never talk to we all talk to ourselves, right? Problem is when we talk to ourselves when we're in public, then people think we're crazy, they're gonna put us away, when we're just talking to ourselves. Exactly. So I'm talking in public to you, but really I'm talking to myself. And whoever wants to hear, Gesundheit. Please, take whatever you like. Mark Lozat is saying people that I'm talking about are like that with everyone. Their message is not directed to me. Okay. No, that's not the point I made. The fact that we hear something means it was meant for us. The question is what was meant for us. There's a message there. What was meant for us? The Baal Shem Tovs were the students once in the Carpathian Mountains, cold winter day. And the Baal Shem Tov would always say, whatever you hear and see is a message from on high that we are supposed to take something from it. So they were going to the students and they see carved out on the side of the mountain is a tzelem. It's a cross. Not exactly a Jewish thing. I mean, quite the opposite, right? It's done a lot of devastation to the Jewish people, that symbol. Not a symbol that we, you get it. So the students say to the Baal Shem Tov, what kind of message you take from that? Imagine. Thousands, tens of thousands of Jews who were massacred because of that symbol. How are you going to take a message? So Baal Shem Tov says, when your heart is cold to godliness, to your prayers, to doing a kindness to another, you have a cold heart, it's like having a tzelem in your heart. So, for everything we can learn a lesson. So, again, what's the message? Here the students couldn't imagine what kind of message you should take from this. So sometimes we can have such a negative thing that was so told to us, something so hurtful, so painful. Again, don't take the hurt, don't take the pain. Take the message. What is it? Baal Shem Tov will help us with that. And, I'll try to help wherever I can. Any other questions? Any other comments? John. Sorry. John. Did I see? Do the character traits we should correct appear early in life, or are they a thread that runs through the course of life? Probably both. They're definitely from early on, right? But they are definitely then something that we want to, the earlier we deal with it, then, healthier we're going to be, of course. The later we deal with it, our bones get more brittle as we get older, and change is much more difficult. But that being said, both it's definitely a thread throughout our lives, and it begins at a young age. And if we, If we are servants of Hashem, serving God, then we will, hopefully own our stuff, deal with what we got to deal with, and grow. Anybody else with a question, comment, a share? Okay, so then let me go to Sarah over here. What if after years you finally found a way to come to a person through kindness and try to set reasonable boundaries, but every time you try to get, you get nowhere? Problem is they are family, so you want to create peace, and you feel as though you are just lowering yourself more just to try to create the peace. So again, without knowing more specifics, but the basic idea is, I think there might be something there to read between the lines over here, Sarah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we have to be careful that we are only, that we recognize that we're only masters over ourselves. We can only control ourselves, how we respond and deal with people. We can't control their response. And not only we can't control it, we shouldn't have an expectation. I think part of the issue is that we have an expectation from loved ones, and when they don't meet our expectations, then we feel, what's the point? We get nowhere. If you have an expectation that something should happen, that's the problem. Don't have that expectation. Just be real, be true, respond the way God needs you to respond, and whatever happens is not in your control. And when you try not to control it, then more likely that there'll be some positive outcome. But that outcome, without the expectation of it, the only expectation I have is of myself and how I am dealing with it. I think that would make a huge difference. I read maybe between the lines there, Sarah, maybe not. Based on what you said. All right.
If I can add something, Rabbi.
Go ahead, sure.
And I've seen this with my own family, and I've seen this in workplaces. Sometimes it just takes the right response repeated, in an appropriate manner to the person, to whomever is speaking to you about bringing up the same issue. And with patience and calm, people eventually understand your message if you repeat it enough times.
Right. Yeah. But like you said, with patience and calm. And again, without the expectation. I can't overemphasize that. Expectations is what kills us. Expectations of another. And it's of loved ones. We have expectations. Now, that doesn't mean that a person who is toxic or is just not kind, not nice, whatever the case may be. Doesn't mean you don't create boundaries, but the boundaries are for you. That you can create them for you. You're not creating them for them, right? It's for you. So that's the fine line over here that we need to appreciate, the distinction over here. Hopefully that will help. Yes. Anything else, folks?
Good morning, Rabbi Fine.
Please share with us, Batya.
Good morning. I just wanted to maybe just make a comment, not necessarily a question, but when we have expectations, they're literally setups for resentment, whether it be with ourselves or with a spouse or with our family and or friends or even community leaders. We should not or pretty much going in with our own agendas is pretty much what it leads to.
Right.
So let's not have these expectations on others.
Yeah. That now, what does that mean? Thank you for sharing that, Batya. But doesn't mean that you don't share something with another. That um, if I'd appreciate that if you spoke this way to me. That would be helpful for me. So you're putting it on you, and not having expectation of them, but you're asking them. Doesn't mean you can't ask, or you can't say that this is painful when you say this to me. So you're just sharing. Now, if in that when you're saying that this is painful when you say something like that to me, you're just sharing your feelings about it, and you're saying about yourself, not about the other. If there's an expectation that's going with that, then that could then lead into a problem. But if it's just that I am telling you how I'm feeling about this, then that's legitimate. That's legitimate.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah. Now, of course, if we can rise above that, as we've learned, if you recall, in the third part of Tanya, in Igeres Tshuva, we spoke about Mavir al Midosav Mavir Kol Pesha. That if we are able to rise up beyond our emotions, rise above it, and not and work it through, not just not castigate it and like just don't talk to me, that negative side in me, or that hurt feeling that I have. No, work through the hurt. And we're going to do that now. That's actually, again, through the Tanya Mentor program, how to work through that. When you work through it, then you have let go of that pain. So then, you don't even have to tell them that I'm pained by anything, because you worked it through. That is called an Ubermensch. Or better yet, a chassid. That's a chassid. All right, folks, a reminder today, 12:45, Rambam. Guess what? We're learning about Rosh Hashanah and the shofar. And today we blew the shofar. Actually, maybe we'll do that. At 12:45, we'll blow the shofar for those who get to hear the shofar. Don't have one here now, but perhaps at 12:45 we'll do that if I simply still have it here. All right, folks. Wonderful. And those who didn't get a chance, last night's class was tremendous on Torah studies. You can always get everything on YouTube. YouTube.com/Tanya Rabbi. And if you haven't subscribed yet to the YouTube station, please do. That would be helpful. I appreciate it. Please do that. And, can get everything that's fit to print. Or at least to listen. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zurich Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Be well.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Be well.